The SQE one is tough, and if you're taking it soon, you need a reality check. I just sat mine, and these are the 5 things I wish someone had told me before I started studying. Hi everyone, my name is Alika and I'm a 6th year solicitor apprentice, and I just sat SQE 1. I filmed another video about this, which I'll link in the iCards, and without further ado, let's get right into the video. The first thing I wish I knew was the sheer volume of content is insane. You'll see on the Solicitors Regulation Authority's website, which kind of outlines what you need to know for this exam. Your summarized versions of information, I'm telling you, is not enough. You need the thick stuff that goes into detail. And I only say that because I can't say too much, because obviously the exam, I had to sign an NDA for the exam, but the amount of content that you need to know without having any resources available to you whilst you're in the exam is insane. I don't think there's anyone who could possibly understand the amount of content you need to know before actually sitting the exam. I'll put something on screen which shows a summary of the modules that you need to know, and I think there's corresponding black letter law, which is the actual legal knowledge that you need to know. So there's information you need to know practically, so for example how to, like, what applications you need to make to the land registry, and if you're involved in the process of sale. And the other part you need to know is about maybe easements that may be attached to the land. So that is somebody else's legal right over the land or equitable right over the land. Someone's interest in the land, basically. So there's 2 sides when you're going to study any module. I think the only module that didn't really have like a legal side per se would have been solicitors accounts. My understanding of it was pretty much very practical, but insane nonetheless. And I don't want that to discourage you. I think this is where the next point kind of comes in, is where your study schedule is so important. Do not neglect carving out time, even if you're in the middle of your studies and you're kind of just going along, you're like, oh, I'll just do a chapter a day and like hope that I get there. Like, no, you need to make sure that you have enough time before the exam to drill into your revision, and you can only do that once you have a schedule that sets out kind of what you want to do. Even if, you know, because sometimes honestly life happens, I'm not gonna deny it. There was a lot of health challenges that I faced whilst I was preparing for SQE 1. I was out for like maybe a month and a half. So I'm not gonna come out here and say you need to have a week by week, hour by hour schedule. I did try to do that, and I found it very discouraging, especially because I was working and studying at the same time. I wasn't able to, you know, always show up in an effective way. And I think there was definitely some part of hustle culture that was in me, where I was like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna show up every single day at 3 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to start studying at 3 or 2, to be honest with you. I was like, I'm gonna answer 100 questions a week. But I'm telling you for free, knowing what you're going to do every hour is not the important part. You need to, number 1, make sure you have the strength to absorb information. And number 2, apply the information. So if you have a study plan, you know what you're going to focus on and when. And I only, like, even if you have an order of how you want to study, so you know that you want to finish all of the content at least 1 month before the exam, having done 3 mock exams a month. And then you can even schedule some time out to try a mock exam from this website, a mock exam or test questions from this website, and just sprinkle them around your revision. And the reason I say this is because once you get through majority of the content, or even halfway through the content, you can feel very overwhelmed and frustrated, especially with particular modules that you might not fully understand. And I'm saying all this, I don't even know if I've passed, but I'm just saying the preparation that I did, I think was a bit too much. And I think I did overdo it, and I don't think I needed to go through everything that I did at the intensity that I did. I think if I had a better plan, that's what would have really helped me. Or at least just knowing the order of events and then having a more regimented schedule closer to the exam time. I'm not going to deny the challenge of having to recall information on command in like a minute or 2 minutes, pick an answer and move on. I will say this, and this is just still around the volume of content. Yes, it's a lot of information, but you know, this is not what I didn't do this, but some people strategically may not have put as much energy into studying solicitor's accounts, for example, or not as much studying into one of the sub topics. The only reason I wouldn't suggest doing that is because you genuinely don't even know what could come up in the exam. So you are kind of putting yourself a little bit at risk, but it's whether or not it's a risk you're willing to take. What I'm going to say is this. Right before the exam, I literally had a little mentee bee in the library after I did a mock exam and I didn't get the highest result. I literally got below, I'm not going to say the pass mark, but I'm going to say like the pass range. Which is very frightening. I think I got maybe 55%, just being honest. And I was so discouraged. I spent 3 hours trying to understand one tax question, which I could have reasonably spent on other areas. But I was so determined to try and figure out how this was the correct answer. I wasted so much time. So I think percent like didn't know that what the correct answer was, as in like I genuinely didn't understand the answer. When I tried to go through one of the tax questions, I actually just sat, I just stared because I was like, I cannot figure this out. I'm looking at the textbook and I was getting really frustrated. So I think you need to be wise. Understand what your weak areas are whilst you're going through the content, and don't wait until you get to the end of the module or until you get to the end of the topic before you start creating revision resources. Create revision resources as you go along because there's just so much content. The third point, because I think the first and the second point I kind of interlinked together, but the third point that I wanted to talk about was the psychological toll it had on me. Studying or preparing for SQE1 can feel extremely isolating. And I say this because you can be in your room or wherever you go to study for hours on end just by yourself, going over contracts or criminal or property practice. You're spending so many hours reading and testing and in essence kind of going through it again. And I wish that I honestly was in different areas. I think changing up my study environment more frequently would have helped. To be honest with you, effective if I spent more time understanding my energy levels and studying based on that. So I know, for example, on the weekends, and I know whenever I'm in the British Library, I can focus for hours without interruption. I have so much energy to focus on studying. And if I studied at home in the morning, it was the same thing. But come after work, after a long day of working from home, maybe after an intense gym session, I just didn't have anything in me. And I think you need to, whilst you're studying for SQE1, you need to balance out your energy levels. You need to still keep up with your health. You need to go on walks or runs or do a little dance workout. I was doing dance workouts in the morning where I felt like I didn't have time to go to the gym. And I did stop going to the gym for a little bit right before the exam, I'm not even gonna lie. And it was hard. It was so hard. But so I think there is actually, and this is something I noticed whilst watching a documentary about sports actually, is that you actually can overdo the prep. You can burn yourself out in the time of preparation and not have enough energy when it comes to push forward in the real exam to push. So yes, the psychological toll is real. Please rest before you take this exam. Don't stress yourself out to the point where you can't even take in information. You study better when you're relaxed. You study and take in information better and you remember things more easily when you're refreshed. So please take care of yourself whilst you're preparing for this exam. I know it's really hard, but make sure every single day, if you have time to pick up an SQE book or you have time to do a study question, make sure you reward yourself. And also on the flip side, stop rewarding yourself when you know you've not put the work in. Like, yes, you might need to take a break, but if you know in your hearts of hearts, you have not studied in 3 weeks, you've not studied in a few days, and you're like constantly just moving anyhow with your exam schedule, like discipline yourself to give yourself reward when you need to and not when you don't. I would also say, just like with any exam season, you need to maybe just take a little bit of a break on your social life. Like, just take your foot off the pedal. Now, I'm not saying that you can't see any of your friends ever for 6 months. And to be honest with you, some people who were preparing for the exam did exactly that. They did not talk to their friends for, you know, however long they were preparing for, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. And they literally just focused on exam prep. I'm not saying that you need to do that. There are some people that you might be able to study with. If your friends work from home and you're studying that day, then you could like maybe co-work, or I don't know how you want to set it up. I did have study dates, and I think it was helpful to lighten the load while still getting some revision in. Honestly, God bless my community because they're so lovely and so understanding. But I know for myself, like at least a month before my exam, I did not. In fact, 6 weeks before my exam, I didn't see anyone. So I think just being aware that depending on how you've been with your studying, you might just need to take a break on that. Okay, the next thing is that the SQE is not a knowledge exam.
It's not a knowledge exam.
Or not all of the questions will be about whether or not something is factually incorrect or not. It's about applying the principles you know to a situation that you may have never seen before, you may never have thought of before, you may never, even if you work in law, that has never come across your desk before. I think this can be a little bit challenging, particularly people who are doing SQE 1 immediately after they've studied a traditional law degree. And I say that because obviously in university, yes, you will have a few problem questions, but for the most part, you're doing critics and analyzing this, and it's very academic. Versus the SQE, it's very heavy applying and practicality, and sometimes even situations you may not have thought about because the textbook didn't directly present it to you in that way. So I just say get a little bit creative in your revision. When you're reading about, breach of contract, think about different scenarios around what this textbook is telling you. For example, if they say the builder is trying to sue for breach of contract because the person hasn't paid them, then you're like, that's quite a straightforward contract scenario. Maybe that's great for the textbook because it helps you have that basic understanding. But think about it from the other side. What if the builder stopped working randomly because they didn't have enough building materials, and then the person's like, well, I'm not going to pay you for all of the work you've done? So you know what I mean? Like, think about the scenarios you're reading in the textbooks in different ways. And if any of the textbooks you're reading give you case names, I am telling you, please read a summary of that case, because though the legal principles from those cases help you to remember in the exam. I'll definitely say that for myself. I remember there were, can I say this? I don't know. Well, what I'll say is this. I remember that there were specific cases that I read in a textbook, and I remembered them in the exam because I remembered the facts of the case, because the case was so like, oh my gosh. And then I'll be like, okay, this is the legal principle. Now I'm in the exam. Can I apply it to this question? Sometimes you might feel really discouraged where, you feel like I can only do really well in this exam and not in the other one. Or maybe you do a mock test and you got 23%. Or maybe there's just one topic that you're just not getting despite how much time you spent on it. Let me say this, we have all been there. There are so many people who have taken this exam before you and have been in the position that you've been in. And I'm saying this because sometimes, as I said before, it can feel very isolating. And this is honestly just to say you're not alone. I literally had a mental breakdown. I was weeping in British Library after I did a mock test from the SRA website and I didn't do well. And I was like, oh, how am I struggling in the mock test? Am I gonna do really bad in the exam? And then I just started to cry. I was like, I've been studying this for a year. And I'm still finding it hard to recall all of this information in a short period of time. And the things I got wrong, I knew. It was just stressing me out, guys. I think if you do, and maybe you won't feel this, and I absolutely love this for you if this is the case, but if you cry, if you have a few mental breakdowns, if you get really stressed out, You know, it's so normal because these exams are very high stake. Okay, people spend a lot of money and time and energy and cancel things and dedicate their life to be focused on this exam for a good few months. It is so normal to have some subjects that you might not understand or that you find difficult to get your head around, or legal concepts that maybe you kind of knew in the degree but you're understanding it even better now. But, or maybe the opposite, you thought you knew in the degree, now you're doing prep. Maybe you haven't even done a law degree until you feel extra inadequate. Like, I'm telling you, the thoughts that came through my mind whilst I was studying SQE1, and I like to say I'm quite a positive person, were interesting. And that was a time, honestly, team, I was literally getting 10%, 20%, 10%. Like, it was really bad. And I was like, I need to just disappear and like lock in. Look, you can do this. And I'm honestly so proud of everyone who has sat that exam and managed to get through it. They didn't like tap out or anything like that. It's very intense, but trust me, it can be done. I don't know if I've passed. We'll get there when we get there. But what I'm saying is this: I'm so grateful that I've been able to finish both of those exams. And if I have to do it again, which I really hope I don't have to, but if I do have to do it again, I can walk in there with so much confidence. And to be honest, when I walked in there the first time, I still had confidence. So, but now obviously when you do it, you kind of know what to expect for the next time. So look, the psychological toll is real, it's intense, it's stressful, and that's why you need to rely on your community. Sometimes having an online community is helpful. I'm a little bit weary to suggest that because there's so much fear mongering online. But yes, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of energy, time, and it's a hard exam. But people have passed, and you can do this. We can do this. We can do this, guys. So one thing, just to wrap up this video, that I would do differently is definitely be more consistent with my studying. I was honestly saying, yeah, like I will 100% be spending more time doing practice questions a month before the exam. I was not expecting to get sick so close to my exams for 6 weeks. It was insane. And then there were a lot of personal things happening at the same time. You just never know what is going to happen when. So I strongly encourage anyone who's going to sit this exam, please try and be consistent as you're able to. But also, and maybe this is like contrary to popular belief, you cannot spend all your time doing problem questions. This exam is not just about being able to get through the questions quickly. Please spend some time getting into the nooks and crannies of those books, those revision guides, like whatever resource you're using, please read every single line. It's so important. And there's 2 reasons why it's important. First of all, because you actually need to know the knowledge of the questions you're answering. And this may seem so obvious, but I'm telling you, for example, one thing for me, whenever it came to tax, sometimes I'd forget the exceptions. I would just forget. And then when I did a mock test and a question about, tax came up, I would include every single figure in the question, not even realizing that because I forgot the exceptions and how the exceptions only applies in a very specific scenario, I just got the answer wrong. Okay, so it's not just good enough to have a general idea of a legal principle. You need to know that in its detail and think about it from different angles. The second thing that I would say, 50% of this exam, confidence. Because I think after I did FLK1, team, I went back and I changed some of my answers. And I was like, I stopped. I think after the 4th one, I stopped changing my answers. I was like, every single time I did a mock test, I would also scribble down what I thought the other answer could be. And 4 times out of 5, the first answer that I put down was correct, even though I could justify the second answer. So I'm telling you, When you know the content, you can answer the questions with a different level of confidence. That hesitancy you have between option A or option B, yes, they are both possible, but what is the best answer? Okay, you're gonna go for the one that is, sorry, the filming just stopped and my tripod thing just broke, so I'm holding the camera. But you're gonna go with the answer that you feel most confident on based on your revision and your studying and the practice questions that you've done, but specifically things that you've read in the textbook, right? So, you know, please do what you need to do to feel confident when you walk into that exam. You don't need to feel like, you know, you come out that exam and you are 1,000,000% perfect and everything you did was correct. But it's having the confidence to say, yes, I think it's A, it could be B. But the reality is, I know, I remember a scenario that's similar, you know. There's so much more that I can say, but I'm going to leave you with this. SQE 1 was hard, but it was not impossible. You know, if I could go in there at 8 a.m. and leave at like just before 6, still make it out the other side, you can do it too. I am very intrigued to see what my results will be, and I am sending you all my love. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.